Good evening, everyone. It is now 6 p.m. Welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission, the work session of Monday, the 16th of February, 2026. I appreciate everyone coming to this special meeting this evening. April, did anyone sign up to speak on any item listed on the work session agenda? Thank you very much. Tonight we have three items on the agenda. The first item is the overview of the Irving Convention and Visitors Bureau, our ICVB. Our speaker is Mara Gast, our executive director, and then we'll be followed by the Irving Las Colinas Chamber of Commerce. Mara, I'll let you introduce yourself and provide a little context.
That on? There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Maura Gast. I'm the Executive Director of the City's Convention and Visitors Bureau. I have been here since the beginning of time. Technically, it'll be 35 years in April. So been through here for a lot of changes. Prior to that, worked in downtown Dallas for the Dallas Times-Herald. And prior to that, Joske's Department Stores. You'll note both very old companies, neither in business anymore. So the good news is we've passed the 4-year mark here in Irving, and you're all safe. Happy to be here. Thank you, Madam Chair, for the invitation. Thank you, Jocelyn and staff, for encouraging it. We really appreciate it. So I want to just first talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and hopefully why it matters to you, and our vision and mission at the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Our vision is that Irving will be a uniquely vibrant destination, attracting visitors of all kinds for an unforgettable experience. And our mission is to enhance the city's economy and quality of life by marketing and advocating for the development of Irving as a premier destination. The work we do includes exhibiting at trade shows, working with meeting planners to sell them Irving as a destination for their meetings, pitching media, consider Irving for stories, and our funding comes singularly from a portion of the city's hotel occupancy tax. We are not the Chamber of Commerce, nor are we funded by membership dues. Beth and I work very closely together and do a lot of things together, but we like to say that I work with people who will come here and leave, and she works with people who will come here and stay. That's kind of where we draw the lines between what we each do. I'm going to ask you to bear with me for a little bit of a history lesson and then talk about what we do and the visitor economy's impact here on Irving, the hotel tax allocations and what they do to support the city's quality of life, our role with economic development, and then get into, in particular, our role as it relates to hotels and hotel development, and then just give you a kind of look at where we're going as an organization. So there was a panic in 1893 that led to the first Convention and Visitors Bureau, and it was noted in the Detroit Journal in February of 1896 that in the past few years, Detroit had become known as a convention city. People coming from hundreds of miles, manufacturers coming around, all without any effort. They were just coming there because they wanted to. And so the author of the article said, can Detroit, by making an effort this year, secure the holding of 200 or 300 of these national conventions? It will mean the bringing here of thousands and thousands of men from every city in the Union, and they will expend millions of dollars with the merchants and the people of the city of the Straits. And shortly thereafter, the Detroit Convention and Businessman's League was founded and took to the roads around the country selling Detroit. Several years later, one of the other early it was the Jamestown, New York Board of Commerce, their version of the chamber at the time, said conventions have a twofold value. First, there is the money they leave in a city to enter the channels of trade. The second is the advertising value to the city, and that's really what our function is. Conventions over the decades and really over the centuries have led to urban resurrections in many communities. When a great portion of Chicago was burned down in the Great Chicago Fire, Chicago reinvented itself with an exposition hall to bring people back in. Baltimore's Inner Harbor today looks much different than Baltimore's Inner Harbor of the 60s and 70s. Post-war recoveries was another one of these. In the Las Vegas post-World War II, Las Vegas had boomed with business travel from a gunnery school that was there that sent military leaders there for training, and there was a huge production of magnesium. When the war ended, hotels, restaurants, everything were empty in the middle of the week. Civic leaders in Las Vegas said, how do we keep that momentum going? And they determined they were going to build a convention center in the 50s so that they could fill the city in the middle of the week with conventioneers and their attendees. Images, reinventions. This is one of my favorite stories. If you are of a certain place and time, you will remember that Fort Lauderdale was known back in the 50s and 60s and really up until the early 70s as spring break capital of the world. Hundreds of thousands of teenagers crammed into hotel rooms during spring breaks. 8 or 10 of them sort of slept in a hotel room. They trashed the city, they trashed the beaches, they had a great time and gave Fort Lauderdale this great identity as a spring break community. And at some point in time, Fort Lauderdale said, enough, we want to trade those hundreds of thousands of college kids on spring break for a much more discretionary traveler with a lot more money and spread that impact throughout the year. And they reinvented what Fort Lauderdale is known for. And today it's a very luxurious destination with high-end hotels, a beautiful convention center with a new Omni Hotel that they've just expanded. So very intentional on Fort Lauderdale's part to reinvent themselves from the spring break capital to a luxury convention city. And we've done the same thing in Irving, not that we were the spring break capital, but we've done a lot to reinvent Irving and to create this next act. And the media and the market has paid attention to it. When we first began the process to build what would become this version of the Irving Convention Center, we knew that Texas Stadium was losing its tenant. We knew that the city was going to lose a lot, the residents were going to lose a lot that were part of their identity for so long. We lived for hearing Howard Cosell Monday Night Football talk about, you know, the stadium with the hole in the roof in Irving, Texas. We're live from Irving, Texas, the cutaways that would show the Mustangs. And there were a lot of people very concerned that when the stadium came down, Irving's identity would go with it. So this long-range plan that took not just the convention center, but the 40 acres that would become the Toyota Music Factory, the West End Headquarters Hotel, and the convention center. The convention center is 15 years old. It turned 15 last month, and it's done a lot to deliver these next openings in Irving. When we opened, we were surrounded by vacant land. Today, that's not the case, and I think our friends at the Chamber will talk a little bit more, but build it and they will come. State Bank of Texas has consolidated its offices here in this convention center neighborhood. Wells Fargo began moving in 5,000 new employees last August, and then Christus Health set out on the corner of 114 and O'Connor, creating their national headquarters there. Both, actually all three of these wanting to be in the kind of environment that the city was able to deliver with the Toyota Music Factory and the convention center. A pedestrian, walking, friendly, lively. It's added to what's happened at Water Street, all of those things. So build it and they will come is what's happened here in Irving too. Tourism works for Irving. It brings new money, cash, immediate cash daily into our economy with very little impact on the infrastructure. We like to think about our visitors as prospective residents and businesses, and they spend a lot here, and the spending they generate really supports the majority of the cultural attractions we have in Irving for our residents. Visitor spending keeps Irving resident taxes lower by $757 per household annually. So the visitor economy is a little bit over 23,000 jobs. This is our study from 2022. We were waiting to get a little bit past COVID. We have a new study underway, and that'll be done probably by the end of this year. But visitors spend about $3.5 billion a year here in Irving. There's about 4.3 million visitors a year in Irving. We don't necessarily notice them. They don't look like tourists at Disneyland. They don't look like your general version of tourists, because the majority of them are business travelers here, spending money on the company credit card. They're mostly here from Monday to Thursday. They blend in with all of us in our restaurants, particularly if you go at lunch Monday through Thursday or dinners out Monday through Thursday. I can guarantee you that in most of our larger restaurants, half of the people in there are from a non-local zip code. They're there from out of town, either working for the companies that are based here in Irving, calling on the companies that are based here in Irving, doing training, doing projects. And then each year, that $757 a household I mentioned earlier, the taxes that are derived from Irving visitors and the hotels paying property taxes is about $70 million a year. So when you take the visitors out of the equation, then you don't have that $70 million in taxes coming into the community, and that's where that $757 million a year, $757 a household in savings comes in. If the visitors go away and the taxes they generate go away, then the city can't provide the same level of services as you could without those monies. This is the heart and soul of what we do. It's all about other people's money, and that's what we're after. We try to use other people's money to make this money strong, to make this community stronger. We are the city's official destination marketing organization. We like to say we preach the gospel of Irving as a destination for any kind of travel to those people who can influence travel decisions. Our funding comes from hotel occupancy taxes. We broker short-term business opportunities between our customers and our industry partners, but on their terms. We control very little direct product. We have control over the Irving Convention Center and what gets booked over there. We have control over 275 of the 350 rooms at the West End Headquarter Hotel, 10 days a month, 2 years and out. But if we can't make those two things work out and line up the right way, we certainly can't make anybody else who we have no control over, the Omni, the Marriott Las Colinas, others, say yes to a deal if it doesn't make sense for them. And we have direct responsibility for the performance and operations of the convention center. So about a quarter of the revenues that come to us from the city's hotel occupancy taxes, we use to support the operation of the convention center, to provide for all its capital needs, to cover its operating subsidy, and to make sure the building continues to look good and deliver on its promises to the community. And we build long-term revenue and stability for the community by bringing in outside money, by creating an image and awareness of Irving on the outside. Our key priorities are to solicit meetings and groups to meet here, to build awareness of Irving, to influence appropriate product development, to provide leadership for the industry, and to secure the resources that let us do the work. Our focus is on generating room nights. It's really self-serving. The more room nights we generate, the more revenue we have to operate from. And the room nights we're working to generate come into our hotels directly through events at the convention center. Many are standalone events inside our hotels. If we can get dates at any of the city's sports fields, and we try to bring sports tournaments and programs because they are primarily on the weekends when our hotels and restaurants need it the most. Our customers are primarily meeting planners, travel managers. In some companies, they are part of the procurement operation, association executives, sporting events, reunions, administrative professionals, sometimes volunteers, sometimes wedding planners. We have some key market segments, so corporate markets association. There are Texas associations of lawyers and national associations. Texas groups typically are required to meet in Dallas-Fort Worth every 3 or every 5 years, depending on what their bylaws rotation says. And then national organizations typically will get to the middle of the country either every 3 or every 5 years. So they'll do an East Coast, Center, and West Coast. What we're trying to do with those association execs is when they're considering our part of the state or our part of the country, is to have them consider and select Irving. The SMERF market is kind of a catch-all for primarily volunteer-driven groups. It stands for social, military, educational, religious, and fraternal organizations. They're also very weekend-dominated. They tend to be more volunteer-run than staff-run, so they're a special kind of customer that takes a little bit of hand-holding. But again, they're a perfect fit for better rates, friendlier rates on our hotels because they're coming on the weekends when the market is softer. And then sports and entertainment. Sports can be spectator sports, they can be amateur sports. We do a number of things at the convention center. We do fencing, we do judo, we do some cheer events, we've done taekwondo. We have a finite amount of dates that we can get into the convention center. We have very few dates that we can get at in the city's parks and rec facilities because those are prioritized, and rightly so, for resident uses. The markets where we're primarily in geographically are Austin, because that's where the majority of the state associations are based, Washington, D.C., because that's where the majority of the national and or international offices are, Chicago, a high level of corporate and medical groups there, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, insurance, financial in that area, and pharmaceutical. And then sometimes as well, Indianapolis and Colorado Springs for national sports governing bodies. Weekend room nights are a key priority, and again, trying to create awareness of Irving outside of the market. As I mentioned, these are kind of all the categories our customers fall into. And we're a very, very short-term market, not just at the convention center, but especially in our hotels. Our groups are typically booking in the year for the year. We could get an opportunity surfaced today for a group that's going to make a decision and be somewhere in 2 weeks. That's really the nature of the corporate market, and it's also the nature of the size of the groups we're dealing with. We're typically looking at 600 to 800 person groups for the convention center that'll use at least 3 hotels and a minimum of 400 rooms, sleeping rooms contracted for each night. So a little bit about hotel occupancy taxes and how they influence or impact Irving's quality of life. Hotel occupancy tax revenue funds the Convention and Visitors Bureau operations, Convention Center's operations, the Irving Arts Center, the Irving Archives and Museum, the Jackie Townsend Bear Creek Heritage Center, the Mustangs of Las Colinas Museum, and the Ruth Payne House. Since a hotel tax was first implemented in Irving, more than $570 million has been collected. $131 million of that has gone to the arts, and that is net of the debt for the Irving Arts Center theaters. $212 million has gone to our operations, and actually our early operations actually funded the original offices at the Irving Arts Center. The portion that goes to our operations includes the operating subsidy and all capital requirements for the convention center. $12 million has gone to the city's historic preservation efforts, the Archives and Museum, Jackie Townsend Bear Creek, Mustangs of Las Colinas, and the Ruth Payne House. And then $215 million has gone to debt service to build the Arts Center theaters and side galleries, the convention center, the entertainment venue, and then the city-owned elements of the Westin Convention Center Hotel. So our role with economic development comes down to this philosophy. We know that if we build a place where people want to visit, we'll build a place where people want to live. If we build a place where people want to live, we'll build a place where people want to work. If we build a place where people want to work, we'll build a place where business has to be. If we build a place where business has to be, we'll build a place where people have to visit. And it all starts with the visit, and the visit starts with us. We like to think of ourselves as the first date of economic development. So the automotive industry in Detroit didn't happen intentionally. It happened accidentally, and it happened because the Packard family was visiting a convention there, and they were from Iowa, and they came to Detroit and found Detroit and said, we're going to move the company here. And this was part of the MO of that originally Detroit Convention and Businessman's League. When you hear of any concern that thinks of moving, start out to do just one thing, get them to visit Detroit. And that way Detroit can get plenty of good factories. Obviously, the business world has changed over time. It's not necessarily a factory conversation before, but if the first visit is good, it does a lot of good for the city. There's a lot of things with economic development in our world, in the Convention Visitors Bureau world, where the interests intertwine and they connect, and they're very similar. Both of our customers are interested in arts districts and mixed-use developments and large-scale projects and waterfronts and redevelopment, preservation, and small-scale projects, and open spaces that are green spaces. All of these things that are important to the city and to the community are equally important to the economic development sector and to the Convention and Visitors Bureau, to the traveler, to the future visitor, future residents. When corporate executives are surveyed for what influences their decision for priorities for relocation and retention, a key factor is that quality of life, the community culture. What are the amenities that they can recruit and retain talent for? Priorities for relocation and retention for locational advisors. So these are third parties corporations will hire to site select for them. And again, that quality of life is a priority as they look at what's there. For the impressions, 60% of these decision makers, their impressions are formed from firsthand experience. So they're experiencing the destination. So when we bring a manufacturers conference home to Irving, we get 300 or 500 manufacturing executives to see this city and to see an airport that works really well, and to see quality hotels, and to see quality restaurants, and to see easy and efficient transportation. And that's why that firsthand experience is so critical. They may come here for a visit, but they know it works, and that way when they're thinking about relocation or retention, relocation or expansion, we want them to think of us. Placemaking is key in the economic development space, as it is in your space, as it is in ours. All of these things are key. We want to be able to capture people in every phase of life as a traveler, but also as a future resident, as a future investor. City has an economic development strategic plan that they adopted in 2024. there were three primary goals: innovation, reinvention, and placemaking. And under placemaking, the strategic initiatives are kind of where our responsibilities lie. We work certainly to support new development, to support attraction capacity, upscale hotels, higher priority reinvestment, brand unity. Targeted events and conferences is really important. We know who the target markets are that the city and the chamber economic development entities have defined as the prospects we want to get here, to relocate or to expand. So our team looks for conferences that fit that bill so we can bring them here and help sell that first date message. Hotel inventory and hotel development priorities, and this is where we really end up spending a lot of time with you guys. This is Irving's hotel supply history. Steady and slow. It kind of started around 1980 with 2,000 rooms. It jumped in the early 90s to 6,400, and then a very short amount of time. I've done something creative with math here with dates. But quickly almost doubled its room inventory, the bulk of those being select or limited service rooms in a very small amount of time. We've opened a handful of hotels, about 6 or 7 properties in the last 20 years that are full service. So the bulk of the growth you see on the screen is limited service and select service properties. When we first worked with Planning and Zoning Commission back in 2006 to get the changes that were made to the hotel development standards at the time, the concerns were that there was a lot of overbuilding happening. The market was prime for lending, development was very flush, and so cities surrounding Irving were revising their zoning and pushing more development, particularly as it related to hotels, into Irving. Post 9/11, we saw rate integrity plummet. So when you have a limited service hotel property with no demand generators of your own, you don't necessarily have meeting space, you just have the hotel sleeping rooms. When the market gets soft, as it will, the only way you compete is by lowering your rate. Once you lower your rate, everybody else in the neighborhood lowers their rate. Post 9/11 and post 2008-9, it took Irving's average daily rate citywide about 6 months to drop and about 6 years to recover. That's a long, long way to go. So that's a concern. And the neighborhood and property integrity, particularly at this point in time, as hotel flags were traded lower and lower and became generic in some cases, some of those properties became criminal and code nuisances. Once you don't have a brand on that flag, once there's not a Marriott or a Hilton or an IHG behind the flag, there's also no brand standards. So there's nobody coming through once a year checking to make sure you're doing things the Marriott way, the Doubletree way, the Courtyard way, whatever those requirements are. So once the brand standards go away, the caliber of property declines, and that's a concern. Then we were, in 2021, we worked with you all and the city staff again to look at changes, and we were asked to revisit the ordinance because so many projects were coming forward requiring variances. We were asked to survey the hotels on what they thought about further changes, which would have revised the standards considerably lower, and the hotels were not supportive of those changes, not surprisingly. City Council really wanted to reserve the right to grant variances, and so that's kind of where things settled. The industry is cannibalizing itself. They're continuing to invent new properties. Rate integrity is still an issue and concern. Neighborhood and property integrity is still an issue and concern. And now we have about a third of the city's debt tied to hotel occupancy taxes. And so those hotel occupancy taxes, that debt was based on projections. Those projections were based on assumed average daily rates. Every time the market craters, those tax rates and the collections associated with them crater. Then the tax collections aren't sufficient to pay the debt service. We don't want that to happen. We want to keep tax collections on our guests high. We want to keep those revenues solid so that no other source of revenue for the city has to be provided to make up for that debt. So here's the state of the Irving market as of December of 2025. That's the most current data we have. At the top, you'll see the all-suite extended stay Irving, 59.5% occupancy, 60%, but an average daily rate of $94. When you look at the full service, Even DFW South at $104, DFW North $153, Las Colinas $209. So big difference in what the full-service properties are generating in terms of average daily rate. RevPAR is really about the hotel owners. This is revenue per available room. This is how the owner or the property makes its money. So strong numbers there are really what we're working for. The cost of doing business has increased so dramatically. Ours is a very labor-intensive business. All the costs you see increasing at the grocery store or in your business, we see magnified by 600 people at a banquet for the cost of chicken. So everything is just continuing. But you see the stronger performance. This is where you can't just look at one slice of data. You can look at, go, oh, gosh, the full-service hotels are only at 55% occupancy, but it's night and day what they're delivering in average daily rate. And that average daily rate is what pays the city's debt, right? So that's why we want to see that rate strong. This is our sub-market, the geographic markets. Typically in a hotel market, and December is probably our softest month of the year. Because we're primarily business travel, once those first 2 weeks of December are off the books, people start taking off, companies aren't having meetings, and it waits until the first full week of January to come back. So Irving in December was soft. We're around 60%. You can see the rates are dropped. You can see how it kind of breaks out across the Irving market geographically, and then against Texas. Typically, and let me just bear with me for 1 second, typically when the market hits the mid-60s in occupancy and that's sustainable, that's when developers are going to try to get in and bring in a new product or build new product or take over properties. We typically hover around the mid to upper 60s the majority of the busy months of the year. So these are some of the trends that are impacting development right now. So there's very few true full-service flags that are available. We've never had a Hilton proper in Irving. We don't have a Hilton proper in Irving because 40 years ago when the Hilton DFW Lakes was built in Grapevine, they were given a exclusive ring of about a 20-mile radius. Today, the radii that are being given are 3 miles. So that's why you see properties, it's kind of like the Home Depot and Lowe's across the street from each other or the CVS and Walgreens across the street from each other. It's why you see the clusters and you see all these brands building new select service flags, not because there's a demand, but it's very easy to take to the bank, low overhead, very efficient to operate, very small guest rooms, so 250 square feet a room is typical in most of these. By contrast, the rooms at the Omni, which is one of the older properties in Irving, but the rooms there are over 400 feet. The rooms at the Omni are a luxury for how big they are, but 250 square feet for a room is a really, really small room. And then you see existing brands just reinventing themselves. You've seen it, and you guys certainly have seen it here, the emergence of these multi-brand hotel complexes, where you have two hotel flags from the same company building on the same site. It allows them to share constructional and operational expenses. It creates some greater cost efficiency and less overhead, but you're typically not adding anything to the market. It just helps them spread the cost out over two separate projects. Our concerns currently, again, the rate integrity. A third of the city's debt is tied to hotel occupancy taxes. Watching the industry cannibalize itself. Those flag restrictions that I mentioned earlier. Currently, Hilton is developing 29,000 rooms, bringing them up to 371,000 rooms in 2,400 properties, and only 38 of those are in that luxury category. We're concerned about neighborhood and property integrity citywide, but also in the stadium redevelopment area, in the urban center, especially at the fringes, and along Highway 183, where the city's first hotels were built. And the full-service flags for us in Irving are very limited because of existing flag restrictions, because they're very expensive to build and finance, and because there's very few new full-service flags being created. So now just a little bit to look at where our organization is going. our board really works to make sure, so this chart shows the tourism area life cycle, and what we always want to make sure is we never get to item 7 or the point 7 where you're declining. We want to make sure that the life cycle of our tourism product continues to rejuvenate, and that's kind of really where we are right now. We want to keep moving things forward. In 2005, the plan that led to the development of what became the Convention Center and the Toyota Music Factory, what we were trying to tackle, and we still are, is that we are a city built for business, and that is a wonderful thing Monday through Thursday. But the moment the market gets soft and dips from an economic standpoint, the first things companies cut are travel and training, and we feel that immediately. Business drops off overnight. It leaves us very vulnerable when just those standard economic cycles happen. It leaves us vulnerable most weekends. It leaves us vulnerable in the summer. It leaves us vulnerable in the holidays. So we looked for ways to create demand that could be sustained in soft times and year-round. And we had a challenge with the limited entertainment options there were for our hotels. So when our hotels were losing business, they were losing business because there was a lack of something to do. We would use an incentive fund in our budget to pay for buses for guests at hotels to go to the Stockyards in Fort Worth or to go to Grapevine. But equally importantly, and possibly more so, is that these same kinds of amenities had become a priority for corporate site selectors. So 30 years ago, when a company was looking at expansion or relocation, they were looking at nothing but the bottom line. What is this going to do for us financially? In the last 20 years, that's changed because the talent market has gotten so tight. Companies are looking for places that they can recruit and retain talent. And that's as much part of the game now as it is. And so as big leases were coming due, particularly in the urban center, and lots of new and fancy was being built up in Frisco and Plano, we needed to work with our corporate residents, the Chamber of Economic Development, to find a way to keep those people here, to give them that which they were looking for, to keep their employees with amenities, with things to do after the workday had ended. With the convention center, our goals were to take advantage of the setting we were in, very much built for business, built for grown-ups. We wanted to make sure that the building would be placemaking and distinctive. Most of our clients are outgrowing their hotels. We want to make sure they still feel that kind of elegance, if you will, of a hotel setting. We wanted it to be right-sized for Irving. We wanted to recognize who our core users were going to be and what their expectations were, and we needed to move the needles the marketplace needed moved, which was the weekends, which was giving our hotels something to make them more competitive, to shore up those long-term commercial leases, and then to have something to target discretionary travelers, people who are traveling because they want to with their own money, and to give them a reason to pick us. And we've done, I think, a really great job in delivering with the convention center with really great positive reviews and a lot of return customers. So what the convention center gave us was a three-legged stool. The convention center drives new and incremental activity, particularly on weekends, and because of its meeting space and what's been built with the music factory, it provides an amenity for our corporations. The entertainment district itself drives leisure-based activity, so people don't just have to come here for a company meeting anymore. Gives our hotels something to compete with. None of our hotels is more than 7 miles from the music factory, and those that are farthest away have shuttles that they're already shuttling people to nearby restaurants for. Gives our hotels an asset, gives our commercial offices a tenant amenity. And the headquarter hotel, which was the last piece to come online, really provides a necessary element to be the rising tide. By generating true convention bookings requiring multiple hotels. We did not build and invest in the Westin just to support the Westin. You don't get to be front in line in booking dates at the Irving Convention Center unless you have a minimum of 400 rooms on contract, and we're only allowed 275 of the Westin rooms. 10 days a month, 2 years and out. So that means we have to put together a package that is appealing to the other hotels, that the Omni says yes to, that the Marriott Las Colinas says yes to, that the Ritz says yes to, if we want to be able to put together the package that makes the deal work. As we look to grow hotel occupancy tax revenues, we're kind of tapped out, or capped out, if you will. We have very finite controls to shift the calendar. As I mentioned, the convention center is doing 250 events a year. We have very few open dates to plug anything else into, so it's not a case of book more events. We have finite days, we have finite rooms that we can coordinate with those days. As I mentioned, we only get a small portion of the Westin's rooms. We have access to book the Live Nation Pavilion 1 year and out, but our capacity is also finite. So the 50,000 square foot exhibit hall at the convention center is really our largest single space to put anybody. We can max that space out just under 5,000 people for a college graduation kind of setting. We've had 25,000 people take the full building for a Comic-Con kind of thing. But for the most part, 600 to 800 attendees at the convention center is kind of our sweet spot. There are a number of city-controlled outdoor event sites, but there's limited capacity to these and no or limited parking access, and those would include Levy Event Plaza, the canals, the promenade, the plaza at Williams Square, and then Heritage Park and Delaware Creek. And then the other city-owned assets that we have are really prioritized for resident use, and none of them are large enough to drive significant new demand. So the Parks and Rec facilities, and then the Irving Arts Center. But we have to figure out what else to do because everybody around us is doing things. Josh, you asked about whether or not Dallas was going to blow up City Hall, and there's no telling. But that's obviously something that's in play. McKinney has approved their first commercial airline. I noticed earlier today that they think they're getting ready to make a second. Fort Worth is advancing another expansion of its convention center for $606 million. There's a third Lowe's hotel coming to Arlington. Soccer's version of Topgolf is going to Grandscape in the Colony. Mansfield has plans for a $2.5 billion sports stadium and entertainment district. And then the Hunt Realty Fields West project in Frisco at $425 million, which is just their construction loan. So we've got to figure out a way to keep up, literally and figuratively, with the Joneses if we want to be able to keep these funds coming into Irving. So that takes us to our board and its next version of its strategic plan. We've got a series of studies, some that have been completed, some that are underway. We worked with Clarity of Place a year ago to look at destination-defining development opportunities. We recently completed a resident sentiment survey regarding the future of Irving as a destination. We have a stakeholder engagement report that's due around the first week of March. We're doing a hotel product assessment, which is going to map the properties in Irving along with 10-mile radius and look at the known projected supply growth, but also look at the properties that are a potential risk of either changing or removing flags or being taken out of supply for other uses. And then hopefully be able to give back to you all and to the council and to the planning staff some data-driven information that'll help with future hotel development and permitting decisions. And then we're working on a series of hotel tax projections. Our board will meet at the end of April to start refining the plan and should be in place to adopt it by the beginning of July or by its board meeting in July, with the goal of starting to fund the next phases of that plan starting in the next fiscal year in October. I know that was a lot. I promised to do it as quickly as I could. I'm happy to take any questions. I'm happy to step aside. I'm happy to let you all breathe. Anybody, anything?
Would you go back to your slide, the three-legged stool? A comment I want to add to this, and I think they may have heard this when we had our 9-hour session last year. Having a destination resort, forget what other amenities they may have, at probably the best location in the Metroplex. It's close to the airports, close to downtown Arlington, whatever. In my career, I've been involved with planning a lot of meetings, a lot of conventions and whatnot for my own companies. But there's one I've been involved with for 25 years, and we would have a annual convention somewhere. Most of the time, it would either be in Vegas, Orlando. Years ago in San Francisco, I'm sure that wouldn't be going back there anytime soon. It would be 25,000 people we brought in for about 5 days. Now, with 25,000 people, and I believe the Sands deal only had 1,750 rooms, there are going to be a lot of hotels that will run out of space. But even more importantly, because there was a question about how about our convention center? And what my experience has been, when you have a large convention coming into a town like this one, that convention, that organization controls the meeting space in either the host hotel and any ones that are associated, not everyone around, but the ones that are under contract. So if I wanted to do a seminar in a host hotel, I had to go to the organization and get them to book it. And so I made the comment, and I know that someone was worried about how this would affect our convention center. And it would only grow our convention center, because that's just one convention of that many people. I don't know how many that size there are nationally, annually, and you probably do know. But any of them that are going to be 5,000 or more rooms is what you're looking for, we'd like to have, and so we are cramped. And the entertainment, the question was also brought up, well, how would that affect the Toyota Music Center? It would bring more entertainment in, because if we're booking more conventions in our convention center, and how close is the Toyota Music Factory to the convention center and to this area here? So this is extremely important. All hot tax and the money that's brought in from the participants, and the money brought in by the organizations that's booking the convention. So this is extremely important, and
And today, we're not playing in that space at all. That's, those big ones are the ones going to Dallas and to Fort Worth, and why you see both of them expanding to keep up in that race. So to your point, we're not in that space today. We're in a much smaller space today. This would allow us, if something larger were to be built, it would allow us to play on a much different field. I don't think it would hurt what we have built. We are right size for who we are. And for what we have to offer today. But something else, if something large were to be built, we would be competing with Dallas and Fort Worth and Houston and San Antonio and Austin and Chicago and those other kinds of places where Irving can't play today. So we're not in that space today. But you're right. And even though the next several years, Dallas and Fort Worth are closed down as they're renovating, but when Dallas is full with a cheer competition of 25 or 40,000 people, it creates compression. If it fills up those downtown hotels, then the business that was going there compresses out to us, and we get benefit of some of those events, either from their overflow or from things that can't go in there because those large-scale events are happening there.
thank you.
Thanks, Maura. I just want to make a couple of comments. When Maura talks about the Irving Convention and Visitors Bureau, I think maybe we focused a lot on the Irving Convention Center and what goes on there, but it's also places like Levy Plaza, which she's mentioned, that you have large-scale events. So people that came to Irving to book that location were Red Bull's Flutog event, as well as the Rare Steak
Festival,
which was really both very different, very cool opportunities where they came to us as a result of the national presence that Maura and her team have built. You also, we touched a great deal on the corporate. I think it's important to talk about the fact that we also do unusual events like the North Texas Teen Book Fair, which has really gone on the map, certainly regionally, if not nationally, where if you're standing at the North Texas Teen Book Fair, you realize that the parents are bringing their teenagers in from surrounding states. They've driven here and made this a overnight or weekend stay in order to attend the Teen Book Fair. So we have some unusual events that occur in Irving as a result of the work. And it's not just conventions and meetings and training sessions and events, but her team just recently, literally last week, Texas Monthly did a wonderful article on the gondolas. So if you have a copy of Texas Monthly, take a look. It's really a lovely story about how the gondolas on Lake Carolyn have made Irving, and it's Maura's team who has made Irving the most romantic city in America because of the Venice gondolas. So it's those unique kinds of things that have made the Irving Convention and Visitors Bureau a really unique, hardworking, successful Convention of Visitors Bureau and driven a lot of the success that Mara's had. She hasn't done it alone. She's got a really strong team. She also has the ICC team behind her, the Convention Center team itself. That is different from CVB. And Chef Alvarez, who has run the food and beverage for 15 years, is nationally recognized. People come to Irving because they know about the chef. The quality of food there is, because I'm pretty sure all of you have been, you may not have yet, but certainly boards and commissions dinner, you'll have an opportunity to visit if you haven't. There are really unique events there. Cornhole, who would think that we'd have a cornhole exhibit? And then the most important part of this, although she won't say, is Mara was recognized in Meetings Today, which is a destination management publication. She was recognized last October, so you could Google that and find a beautiful article about Mara and her expertise and the recognition that she brings to Irving as a result of her teaching and her professional experience with associations related to our business. So, thanks, Mara.
Thank you, Madam
You really
Chair.
do make us look really great.
Appreciate it.
And by the
Great
way,
team.
this chart that you're looking at right here is I know you hear people say something like this or say this. This started with Mara. Mara's recognized for this being the game plan or playbook for destination management companies around the country. So this is really all due to Mara. And we thank her. She's one of many in the city who have driven a lot of success into Irving. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Appreciate the time. Yes, sir.
Sorry, a couple of questions. How do you define a full-service hotel?
Meeting space, sleeping rooms, restaurant, catering capacity, all of those things.
Now, one of the, I guess, issues that we get run into here is that the space, the lot size, doesn't provide that much space to be able to build all that. So how do you?
This is part of that dance, right?
Yeah.
That's it's sort of easy for us to say we don't think you should, but when you have a lot that's an acre or an acre and a half, there's only so much that can fit on it. And the more you say, okay, we'll just go vertical, well, it gets very expensive to do that. And the more rooms you add, the more parking it needs, and the more footprint you take up, the less parking you have to give. And that is, there is the industry has two sides. Developers want to be able to build what they want to build and what they can finance and what they know will make them money. And then, we have this other side of it is this, I don't want to say highest and best use, but it is a little bit of that. There's certain parts of, particularly on 114 or 183, where, it's a parcel that's this big, it's probably only going to be a hotel. And it's only going to be a hotel based on what other flags are left there. And that's kind of when you go, okay, how do we make the best of this hotel? Or what is adding this hotel into a mix that's already very compressed and very competitive going to do? And that's not a fair charge to put on y'all, because that's not a land use charge, but it is a fair charge to make sure we've informed our city leaders about, to say, okay, this is great. Because it would be great if putting in a new select service hotel in a corridor led everybody else in the corridor to improve to keep up with the Joneses. But that's not necessarily what happens. Sometimes what happens is part of the corridor goes up and the other part of it says, I don't want to play that game anymore. It's too expensive to pay this franchise lease, so I'm going to step down to something cheaper. Or I'm going to step down. We've got one hotel calling itself the Las Colinas Inn right now because it's in between flags, and somebody else has gotten the other flag. So that's a disconnect in the marketing message, too, for that momentum. You're out of a national reservation system. You're kind of left here hanging with, hopefully your frequent travelers will come back to you because they know that property. But when you're in a sea of 6 or 8 properties and somebody's counting on their loyalty points, they're not going to go to a non-branded name property with no loyalty points. So it's not fair to put it on y'all. It's more appropriate to put it on council, but at least to inform you of the concerns and why we have the concerns.
Thank you. In regards to the Ritz-Carlton, now that they purchased the Four Seasons, how successful has it been since they got purchased Or has it, yeah?
It's done very, very well, and it's not just because it's moved to a new flag. It's because they put, I think, $60 million into the property to do that. So it boggles my mind to say that a Four Seasons needed $60 million to become a Ritz. It's hard to, I think of those two being in the same category, but in order to get that Ritz flag and to generate those Ritz rates, that's what it took, and the property is in beautiful condition. It's the sports club and the golf courses are now owned by a separate entity, but they've made it still very easy for hotel guests to take advantage of those. So it's doing very well.
Would you say that's the most successful hotel in Irving?
Yes, but there's nothing else that looks like it in Irving. It's not fair to compare any of the other hotels to it just because it's the only true resort we have. You don't typically find a property like that in a very dense suburban area. But we have other hotels that are very excellent performers based on their own part of the market. That Westin across the street from the convention center is doing ridiculously well.
Final question about how many hotels are coming to Irving?
We've probably got about 3,000 rooms in the rumored possible pipeline. Somebody's looking at sites, whether they've actually gotten into the planning process. Probably very few of those have. I would bet there's less than 500 rooms right now that are in some kind of planning thing, but those are all mostly 100-room hotels.
Sorry, one more question. You mentioned Wells Fargo had about 5,000 people that they relocated to their facility. Have they already moved in?
Yes. They moved them in about 1,000 people a week at a time starting in August, so they're all there now.
Now, were those people mainly all from local?
I'll let the chamber speak to that because they're more directly. Many of them were, but many of them were also coming from out of the area. From a corporate talent retention standpoint, they have picked the Irving project, Charlotte, and New York to be their three priorities. So when they're recruiting executives, they're going to direct them to one of those three sites is where they're moving people. And the HR team here, and I'm sure it's at all of their sites, their resource to work with to build employee engagement programs, all of those is dependent on the head count in the building. So everybody's really keen on making this building the place where people want to be based.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
Are we working with the non-branded hotels to try to improve their quality and their appearances and stuff that we have?
So that's part of what we're trying to do with this hotel assessment study is try to figure out what we can do. Some of them, when they're not branded, it's interim. They've stopped. Well, in this case, we've got a new combo hotel being built off of 114 in Wingren. That as soon as it opens with, I think it's a courtyard and a residence elsewhere are going to have to close and reflag as something else because they're going to have the new flag. We've got one property that's between flags right now, but what we're trying to figure out is where's the risk and what can we do either as a Convention Visitors Bureau or as the city. We've talked with city management about what does in the same way the city's created the facade improvements and some of those other kind of projects elsewhere in the city, what might that look like with a hotel in the same way as they incented a grocery store to build in a certain area? Is there something we can do from a facade improvement sort of lens or a flag improvement lens that delivers sufficient revenue, like capping property tax for the next 10 years on that property? Does that generate enough revenue to allow the owner to invest in the property in order to keep it up? So that's what we're trying to work through with this hotel assessment.
So we're looking at a lot of the aging motels that we have, like you said, on 183, et cetera.
Trying to figure out what that is, because if that's only going to generate $30,000, it's not enough, and $300,000 may not be enough. So we kind of got to really get at that, but then also saying, a lot of when 183 was being expanded, we lost a lot of properties because of the right-of-way, and that turned out to be a really good thing because it kind of got rid of some of those problem properties. Criminal nuisance issues took care of some of the other properties. We don't have the right to not refer people to properties, but when TripAdvisor is telling people to avoid properties because of issues, it puts us in an awkward place trying to do those. But we want to figure out what we can do and see what that looks like.
Okay.
So that's a good segue on what I was going to talk about, is just the hotels. Just give y'all a little background that Maura did discuss, that I guess in 2021, council asked us to review the hotel standards. And so long story short, we did reduce the parking requirement. I think it was 1.1 space per room. It's now 0.7 spaces per room, accommodating the Ubers and the transfer types of facilities. And we also removed the required full-service restaurant, instead requiring that they have some type of market ability to heat up food, again, acknowledging Uber Eats and some of the ways that people eat. What we did keep, which Maura mentioned, is we kept the 200 minimum rooms as a requirement, and we also kept the 5,000 square foot of meeting space. And those were, back to her discussion of value, it was to ensure that we kept and feel free to chime in, Maura, that we kept the price of the room high enough, so we kept the boat raised. And so y'all will occasionally, we actually haven't gotten any hotels in a while, but we were on a roll there for a little bit a few years ago. So when you see a hotel case, we will analyze some of this for you. We'll talk about the 2021 standards, how they're deviating from the standards. And just to give y'all, this gives you some background what Maura said, but also to let you know that we did look at reducing those, but we were afraid if we continued to lower the bar, that people are just going to ask for variances to lower the bar even further. So that's why we kept the bar high. So just put a little context in terms of what she talked about and how those standards could affect y'all as you start to see some cases.
Yeah, and that is exactly it, because we talked about going as low as 125 rooms, which pained me greatly, but it's just a case of if there's still a willingness to grant variances, then let's leave the bar high, because 125 easily becomes 120, and then it's 115, and then it's 105, and what's the difference between 105 and 95? And that's the same thing with the 200. 195, it's better than 185, but once we start creeping at it, we creep at it, and that's our concern, and that's why, working with Jocelyn and the team, we'd rather keep the standards high and allow the variance process to create the exception instead of lowering the standards, because once we lower them, we'll never get them back, but B, it just resets the bar in a much lower place.
Question for you, Jocelyn, in your comment. How does that affect our new ordinances that we have? How is that going to affect her survey of doing possible renovations or facelifts or whatever with the existing hotels? Is that going to have any effect on when they do a substantial amount of remodeling or they invest in it? Or is it going to trigger anything with the ordinance?
No, it won't trigger anything. I mean, they can't, again, remove a restaurant, or they could remove the restaurant, I guess, but they can't reduce their meeting space. I mean, as long as they are keeping what they have and just improving it, not a problem. If they started to expand it, expand their square footage or something, it could trigger some variances potentially. Hopefully they're bringing it closer to being compatible or consistent with the regulations. Generally, the answer is probably going to be no, if they're just doing surface quality improvements.
But it would add if they're trying to add certain amenities to bring their brand up.
You would see it with an RAB is when it might come back to you. If a property isn't currently allowed, doesn't currently have its RAB zoning, then you would see that come through. Most of these smaller properties aren't going to be able to accommodate that kind of an expansion or addition without taking out sleeping rooms. So that'd be I'd be surprised to see many do it. A lot of them do a complimentary happy hour, just limited stuff that's in there, but that would be the kind of thing that might trigger something coming back through the planning and zoning process.
Okay.
Yeah, and hotels have to go through the SP2 process anyway, and often they're like, well, we have to do this anyway, might as well ask for variances while we're here. So if they do anything that's outside of their footprint or outside of their SP requirements, then they could potentially have to go back through zoning. But probably most of them are keeping within the boundaries of who they are.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very much, Maura. I'd also like to introduce and forgive me because I said the name of the organization incorrectly. It's the Greater Irving Las Colinas 5-Star Chamber of Commerce. Don't forget the 5-star piece. And Beth Bowman is our speaker this evening. She's also has her Vice President of Economic Development with her, Diana Velasquez. And you often see Diana in the back of the room when we have some of our big economic development cases. And we want to thank Beth because she just got off an airplane to come here tonight.
Well, good evening, Chair Hack and members of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Jocelyn, you and your team and the city staff. I know I saw Councilman Zaponta. Thank you for the invitation to present this evening kind of an overview of the Irving Las Colinas Chamber of Commerce and the Irving Economic Development. I'm Beth Bowman, and as the chairwoman shared, I have the privilege to serve as your president and CEO of the Irving Las Colinas Chamber of Commerce and the Irving Economic Development Partnership. I'm joined this evening by two of my colleagues, Diana Velasquez, who leads our economic development efforts. So she's often on the road in our target markets, recruiting our target industries that have been identified by mayor and council and the board of directors that I report to. So in addition to working with our partners at the city, I also have the privilege to report to 56 bosses. And then I'm also joined this evening by Joe Chapa, who is our Vice President of International Affairs and Sister Cities. So about 22 plus years ago, the city of Irving had a vision to realize it's a city built for business and so much more, but often business doesn't trust government, so they needed an honest broker in the room. So they started to outsource economic development. And the chamber has the privilege to provide those services through 2 fee-for-services contracts. One is for economic development, and one is for international affairs and sister cities. We publicly report how we are performing against those fee-for-services contracts twice a year to the mayor and council. We're very transparent in that reporting and then go above and beyond as we respect those are your tax dollars and others, making sure that there's always a return on investment for the marketing driving of leads for economic development, and then often making sure to amplify the Irving Las Colinas story on a global scale. So that's just a little bit of how we all work together. Again, I shared a little bit, we're a public-private economic development organization. We don't do this alone. It's truly a team approach. It's the Chamber of Commerce, the City of Irving, the Irving Convention and Visitors Bureau, and the Las Colinas Association. Day in and day out, we're pulling up the red tape to roll out the red carpet for our prospects. We definitely have a target on our back. You have the privilege to represent an incredibly successful community. As Mara outlined, that is built for business and so much more. But with success comes a lot of attention. People want a piece of that success, or they want to tear down that success. So part of the work that we have the privilege to work with is the majority of your tax base, the commercial sector, which is 60% of Irving's tax base. We support business recruitment, retention, and expansion. So our team is often out generating lead opportunities, businesses that are looking to relocate to central locations, pro-business cities. They want safe, talent, placemaking, as Mara walked through, opportunities, and they find that often right here at home in Irving. Then we really have the privilege to work day in, day out with Irving's elected leadership, mayor and members of the council that are extremely pro-business, city manager Hillman and his team, day in, day out, many boards and commissions throughout the city. We've had the pleasure to have projects come in front of y'all for considering zoning changes or variances, and our role is to make sure you have the facts. And then also, we want to make sure that our customers or our prospects that we're working with know that Irving is a location in a community where their project's wanted and where they can get their questions answered in a pro-business time frame. We connect the private investment to the public process and the community outcomes. You know, Mara really shared this earlier. We're a city built for business and so much more. But you see one of our recent ads in site selection, built here, best here. These are, as some would call, our state bird, or the cranes. This was as the Wells Fargo project was being erected out of the ground. And today we get to see that workforce center that many are enjoying literally out the front window of the convention center. So what do we, the Chamber, the Irving Economic Development Partnership, what do we do? I think it's really important for you as commissioners to understand we have a purpose. There is a plan that is ultimately set by the mayor and council, reviewed by my board of directors, Mara's board, others, and then as the paid professionals, we go out and execute that plan. So actually have a copy of it. We're 2 years into our strategic plan. It's very thorough, ambitious goals, but everything we are doing is in alignment with a strategic plan that has been set by your policy body here in Irving. And we do it in a collaborative effort. Our first priority is to support the existing business industry. We've had many of our peers, you know, you've had council members in the city of Arlington say, like, we want a Las Colinas in our community. We've heard many of Mayor Stouffer's peers say, we want this in our community. Irving does it right. And we know at the end of the day, business industry is looking for a location where they can have safe accessibility to ultimately run their business, and they want to be in a community where they're wanted, their workforce feels that they can integrate locally, and ultimately they can accomplish, meet, and exceed their company goals. And many find that right here at home in Irving. We guide businesses from site selection, zoning, and permitting development process very consistently. Many of these individuals, they're getting to know Irving. They don't live here, and so we get to be an extension of their team and guide them through the process. For those companies that are qualified projects, we have the privilege to work with them through the incentive process, workforce partnerships, and infrastructure alignment. Often work with Nathan and his team, as infrastructure is very important. And then, as I shared earlier, we have the ability to market, amplify the Irving Las Colinas story on a national and international stage. And then we want to make sure we accomplish the goals that mayor and council have set out in the Irving Economic Development Strategic Plan, and we accomplish those goals today collectively as a team. This is really just an example of just this past year, our incredible team's work. So these are some of the brands that we've had the privilege to generate leads and opportunities that have come home to Irving. These brands represent over taking down 2.7 million square feet of commercial office space, just over $500,000 in capital investment coming home to Irving, and just shy of 2,000 new jobs that are coming to Irving. So those individuals are coming, they're spending money in Irving. Mara shared we like people, you know, that are spending other people's money right here in Irving. We want to make sure that these employers and their workforce continue to stay in Irving for the long term and spending money here. Mara also shared with you kind of what companies are looking for. Not only do we have the pleasure to work with many companies in their C-suite, but also site selectors. So these are individuals that often, if we are engaging with them, it's almost like being in front of 25 CEOs, and then also commercial real estate brokers. And they're wanting, you know, that access to a market that has talent, that is safe, that has quality infrastructure, and then access to the global economy. I mentioned earlier, retention's really our number one priority at home in Irving. Mara talked about 2 projects, Christus Health, Wells Fargo. Those are retention wins. Probably many people thought that those were recruitment wins. At one point in time, they were. People ask, what's the shelf life, the longevity of our sales cycle? Christus Health, when we had the pleasure to work on that project, it probably took us 3 to 5 years to recruit their headquarters home to Irving, but our job doesn't stop there. Once they decide Irving's going to be their home, we then have the pleasure to introduce them to many partners and integrate them into the market. Well, fast forward when these businesses grow and they outgrow their rentable space, some are looking to establish their roots, and that was exactly the Christus Health story. It was very competitive, but they ultimately selected to establish their roots right here at home in Irving. And that's really a commitment to your mayor and council that set a pro-business tone, the incredible work the city staff does day in and day out, not only for residents, but also for business industry, and our team's ability to generate and build authentic relationships over the life cycle of a company being right here at home in Irving. Why does the planning and zoning matter to economic development? It's really critical. Zoning certainty reduces risks for investors, impacts a deal's viability, right? So if a deal is looking to take down real estate at home in Irving and the parcel makes sense, but the zoning doesn't align with the ultimate use the project envisions, we need to have some conversations. The development standards improve predictability. Planning and zoning decisions impact land use and market confidence. So keep in mind, Mara talked about this at the very end of her presentation, right? We don't want to let off the gas. We've had a lot of significant success. Time often kills deals, so we want to make sure we get answers to questions or get projects through processes at the speed of business. And then strong alignment keeps Irving competitive. I can't stress we are in a very competitive market. Companies at the end of the day want to be in communities where they're wanted. And in North Texas, there are so many vibrant communities where they can choose to establish their business. We ultimately want that to be right here at home in Irving. And then the planning and zoning decisions impact on economic development decisions, really the compatibility, the density and intensity of project design standards. Y'all get to weigh in conditions and variances, and I'll just stress that approval timing. I think it's important for you to know what our customers are saying about Irving. Charlie Schaff, the CEO of Wells Fargo, and Councilman Zapata, you were there that day to help them open their campus. We want to go to places that are business friendly, that are interested in helping us develop the kind of people and resources that we are going to need over a period of time. And that's exactly what we found here. And members of the commission, that here is Irving. That was followed up by a comment by your governor, Governor Greg Abbott, that said, Irving is the most fiercely competitive economic development team his staff has the pleasure to work with. Day in, day out, we know these projects that are generated are in alignment with Irving's economic development strategic plan and are ultimately going to provide a pipeline that allows for the city of Irving to continue to deliver for its customers, not only its residents, but also its commercial. How does the Chamber and the Irving Economic Development support planning and zoning? We have the privilege to work with City Manager Hillman, Assistant City Manager Sanders, Jocelyn, and her team by really pre-screening projects We have a lot of interests. A lot of companies want to come home to Irving, and not all of them are necessarily the right fit. Explaining the zoning expectations and the process requirements, making sure to amplify how this commission has weighed in on previous projects that have been in front of you. We really encourage early coordination with the planning staff, provide kind of that economic context. What are we seeing in the market? How are projects being funded? What is taking place in other communities? And then obviously, as I shared earlier, we have the pleasure to really be the liaison or the conduit between the developers, the city staff, and often the elected leadership at the local, county, state level. I'll just stress the importance of early coordination, and it's really the beauty of, you hire incredible team members, and authentically, we have some crucial conversations along the way, but the individuals that really choose to work here for your city or at the Chamber, at the Convention and Visitors Bureau, the Las Colinas Association, as stakeholders, we all respect each other in our roles and get along. So when we're working with a prospect, we're really just all entering the room, listening to their questions, responding to them, or getting back responses to their questions, and then implementing the process. So again, here, identifying the zoning, land use conflicts. We try to do that early on. Reduce redesign or delays, align project vision with planning goals, improving the quality of zoning applications, right? So as a prospect is filling out an application, we try to remind them there's some holes here, you really need to go back. And then support the efficient and improved decision-making. Once a project enters and officially has submitted with the planning department, we kind of take I don't want to say a back seat, but we don't want to interrupt necessarily that project unless we are asked to factually represent that process. So we look at competitiveness, again, setting that framework for quality of life. Each of you have that key responsibility as commissioners. Enable Irving, Las Colinas to compete for high-valued employers. So as part of our economic development strategic plan, it's very clear, mayor and council's direction of what type of industries they want us to be recruiting into Irving. And also what areas of the city they want us to be focused on for development or redevelopment opportunities. Balancing that economic opportunity with community standards. You talked about that a little bit with Mara from a hotel perspective. We have definitely a very seasoned city, and so we want to make sure where our commercial co-tenanted space are, that those private owners are reinvesting into their space to make sure we can capture that flight to quality that's happening in the market today. Continue to reinforce Irving's reputation as business friendly, and we have earned that reputation because our mayor and council's ability to move at the speed of business, for this Planning and Zoning Commission to move at the speed of business. And then obviously the impacts on Irving Las Colinas' tax base, job opportunities, and livability. Stress the importance of the hospitality sector's health. Equally as important, Irving's commercial tax base is over 65% of the taxes in Irving. You want to make sure that your business industry is thriving. Not only are they residing in the community, but they're also spending money here. Their workforce is spending money here and supporting our Tier 2 and Tier 3 businesses, our restaurants, our healthcare providers. So we are really fortunate to have a vibrant ecosystem, but it doesn't just happen. It's very intentional. And again, we work collaboratively to make sure to retain those businesses that call Irving home today. We're very purposeful on recruiting other businesses to come home to Irving. As land transactions exchange, we have the pleasure to work with our current landowners and walk them through the process or helping them understand the community in which they just purchased real estate in. Madam Chair, I'm happy to take any questions that you or the commissioners have, but that concludes our presentation.
Do we work with the people that, businesses and corporations and stuff to figure out affordable housing and stuff for their employees to keep the retention here?
So we work with our residential real estate agents to make sure to provide what inventory is available on the market, but our team is laser focused on the business itself in retaining and recruiting businesses and their workforce to Irving. In terms of housing inventory, with Irving's central location, their workforce really has a variety of housing available to them, within a 30, 45-minute drive to their office, depending on where they're located in the community.
Is the housing inventory, though, an important factor in you recruiting corporations?
Housing is a topic in which we do discuss. When companies are looking at Irving, they are looking at the regional housing index and affordability and options. Irving doesn't have enough housing, Commissioner, to serve its workforce population. So in addition to our resident population, from 8 to 5 pre-pandemic numbers, we had about 265,000 employees coming into Irving to work.
Oh, this is very interesting. I was curious about just for businesses that are in Irving.
Yes.
At least based on this presentation, it sounds like there's a lot of focus on how do we retain businesses or how do we attract businesses. In terms of maybe the smaller local businesses, is that also part of your mission, or maybe that's another organization? Because I would assume they're not as much at risk of leaving the area. But when I think of Chamber of Commerce, I think that would involve the businesses in all the areas. So I just didn't know if I was thinking about that correctly, or if that's if your mission is more focused on sort of the bigger companies that you're trying to attract or that might leave. Because I think I'm aware there's like a membership, like people can pay to be members of the Chamber of Commerce. So it's not just like fees with the city. So I was just curious to hear more about that.
Yes, so in terms of the chamber itself, so the Chamber of Commerce is a 501c6. We have 2 501c3 foundations underneath the chamber umbrella. The chamber has the privilege to work with our member investors. So these are companies that have decided that they want to pay to join the chamber. In addition to the chamber membership side, though, we have really a hard firewall internally where we have the ability to execute on 2 fee-for-services contracts for economic development, which a part of that includes small business. It's also a key part of the Irving Economic Development Strategic Plan, and then that international affairs in sister cities. What we find with our small businesses is many of our small businesses are wanting our support to amplify and market and tell their story to drive patrons to their establishment. I'm really proud, Commissioner, of the great work we do. We're now entering our 7th year of our small biz blitz. So after May, we will have personally visited 7,000 small businesses right here at home in Irving to say, first and foremost, thank you for having your business in Irving. Drop them a leave behind resource kit of numbers to call, where, from the city to the chamber, we can work to be an extension of their team. And then last but certainly not least, listen to any concerns that they might have and try to address them. But small business is the majority of business in Irving. They're the heartbeat to our community. They're very, very important. And we work with them day in and day out on different levels, not only from an economic development perspective, but also from a chamber membership.
So the business membership part is kind of separate from the advocacy work you're talking about? Is that what I heard? There were different organizations within the Chamber of Commerce?
So within the chamber, we have our small business services, our advocacy, and our Irving Economic Development Partnership, which is really an advisory council for businesses that pay in at a certain level, where they really are a sounding board to help shape the economic development strategic plan and kind of the guardrails that we operate under.
Right. Is there, separate question. Is there anything you can share about the Exxon site? Is there a lot of interest in that site? Is it not much interest? I don't know if there's anything you can share about that, but that seems to me, I would think it'd be an area of interest.
Here's what I will share, and I was just getting kind of the latest numbers from Diana. Our team today, since October 1, has generated over 150 economic development prospect opportunities to consider coming home to Irving, or companies that are here that are looking to expand. Those projects represent about $6 billion worth of potential capital investment and around 36,000 additional jobs coming home to Irving. With NDAs that we sign, code names given to projects, we often don't know who we have the pleasure to sit across from until ultimately we're either shortlisted or a company has decided to call Irving home. So the geographic parcels that you're talking about in the former ExxonMobil site, it's really in the heart of Irving's master plan community of Las Colinas. We're working with the current landowner. It's on the short list. It's a part of the economic development strategic plan of priority redevelopment area. And we're continuing to make sure to submit that as a location for corporations that are looking to set up corporate campuses nestled into a residential community. We're looking and working with developers that see it being kind of the next legacy type of development, so higher in retail with housing and corporate presence. So it is often submitted, and we'll continue to work with the owner. I think it's been covered, depending on what media outlet you read, that it is up for sale. So as that land transaction occurs, we'll continue to work with the future owners. But it's very much a top priority site. You're welcome. Any other questions?
Were you in talks with AT&T? I just heard like AT&T moved to Plano, so I was wondering if was Irving on the map?
So Irving is always on the map.
That's good.
AT&T has a presence in Irving today. They actually have their network intelligence center. We continue to work with AT&T and others in that competitive space daily. And yes, Irving was considered throughout that process, as many other projects as well. But I'll share about 8 months before that announcement, Verizon sent out a global media notification that they were going to be kind of shifting their main hubs for talent. They had made a decision to take down their headquarters for today in Manhattan, focus on Basking Ridge in New Jersey, and then also in Irving, Texas, which is huge. So we're really proud to have a significant workforce presence. They're one of our largest employers in Irving. And Madam Chairwoman, I'm pretty direct. We also, are bullish. We want their headquarters. We want many other company headquarters because it's been identified as a target industry from mayor and council, and we'll continue to be successful at that, working alongside City Manager Hillman, Mara, Hammond, and others as we continue to amplify the Irving story. I'll just lean in a little bit to talk about, we can't let off the gas. Mara talked about the Toyota Music Factory, Water Street, the reinvestment in the Heritage District in South Irving. These are all great, but we have to focus on what's next. Because business industry is being driven by their workforce demanding a flight for quality. So Mara talked about the Wells Fargo corporate campus and that project. We ultimately, as a team, were able to secure that project because of the location and the amenities that ultimately that workforce will be able to take advantage of.
My understanding, kind of going back to Commissioner Lightfoot question, a lot of that relocation, business relocation, does happen to Las Colinas. But why do you think on the residential side they don't really stay to live in Irving? Like a lot of these employees, they choose to go to other cities. Why do you think that is?
So what we hear from our customers is Irving offers the best of both worlds. You have that central location where you can work. You've got access to our economic engine, which is DFW International Airport, right? Just 8 minutes down the road. And then you also have access to Love Field. But your workforce can really choose to live wherever and, under a 60-minute commute. So you might have some employees that are really driven by a rural type of lifestyle and they want to live on a ranch, and you have others that might want to live in, a multifamily development or a condo type style. We have those options in Irving, and we also have communities that have surrounding options for them to choose from. So we look at it as a competitive advantage that employers get to show to their workforce, hey, we're mindful, time is money. We're going to locate our business in a safe, central location. And you and your family get to choose so many of these communities that are vibrant near Irving or just down the road from Irving that fit your family's needs.
Have you ever heard anything against the ISD?
We hear a lot of feedback from our projects that we have the pleasure to work with that locating in Irving gives their workforce access to many different choices. Irving has quality schools, public, private, charter, homeschool network. Our job is to make sure that our companies and their workforce are aware of the options.
Are there plans for, I heard that there's a plan for maybe Wells Fargo to expand. Is that correct, or is that too early to say?
So each company that is at home in Irving today, we look forward to having conversations with them to continue to expand at home in Irving, either their physical presence or grow their workforce.
Thank you.
How has impact fees that we just recently implemented, has that affected your development, your economic development going forward?
So we understand that impact fees, we understand why they were created and ultimately decided by mayor and council. We communicate that today doing business in Irving, that's part of the process. For some development, I would say it has slowed the interest in Irving, but hasn't taken us out of the conversation. And again, for target industries, target workforce, target areas of the community, we have a conversation around it. I am not aware of a project, Diana and Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, that has said we're not coming to Irving because you've initiated impact fees. We are very upfront, Commissioner, that Irving has implemented impact fees, so we're transparent in that process that they know if they're going to develop in Irving, there are going to be impact fees tied to that development.
I'd like to offer a couple of comments and just one or two quick questions, Beth. I think it's also, like with Mara Gast and a number of our other city employees, to recognize the experience and the intelligence that we have with us. Beth Bowman had a wonderful interview with the Dallas Business Journal last month. It's a video, so if you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, I would, because it highlights a number of the experiences that she's talked about tonight. She's also been awarded the 40 Under 40 awards by both the Dallas Business Journal and also the Association of Chamber of Commerce Executives. So while she might be a little coy about some of her answers this evening and very professional, she has been recognized by the industry as a leading advocate for development. She's also one of top 50 economic developers in America, and that was the designation by the Association of Chamber Executives. Yeah, so we have a lot of experience. We're really lucky to have both Mara, Beth, and her team. And Joe, I apologize for not mentioning you earlier. So I have two quick questions. Several of us went to the Texas APA conference in College Station. I went to one of the seminars that talked about the space industry. I know that through your strategic plan, you focus on, you've mentioned tonight, finance, insurance, technology. Are we looking at the space industry? Because I got the sense that it was a new segment for Texas, but also becoming a very key segment for Texas. Not just SpaceX sort of campuses, but I mean, there's Arlington businesses that are getting awards from grant money or so forth from the state to bring in space industry businesses.
Yep. Our friends in Arlington, full transparency, we call it Far West Irving. And when we're in Arlington and working with our peers in that space, we continue to call it Far West Irving. Marty and his team, they have a great mayor over there. It's a great community. Yes, space industry is growing with some of the attention and available financial resources. In Irving, aerospace aviation is really critical. The current strategic plan has not necessarily addressed space for us to be aggressive, but it has addressed the biomedical attention and being more aggressive at going after other biomedical, pharmaceutical type companies, especially with McKesson bringing their global headquarters home to Irving. But we're not opposed to having conversations with those companies.
Thanks. And then we spent a lot of time talking about the corporate area in Las Colinas and related. I noticed on your map with your focus, it did have South Irving on there, Plymouth Park, Irving Mall. We've had some discussions and cases here, and Daniel raised a really good point in one of the Irving Mall cases that we had, that why are we allowing for variances there to perpetuate the same types of businesses there, that if we held the line, maybe the owner would move towards something that might be more amenable or more forward-thinking in that area. So could you address maybe a little bit about South Irving in particular?
Yeah. I mean, we think South Irving is a great investment, right? One of the more established areas of our community, beautiful quality trees, niche neighborhoods with various personalities. It's a large part where some of our largest employers on the manufacturing space reside, a small business community, a really quaint local charm. So Mayor and Council just, I believe y'all had a conversation around a project recently in South Irving. So we are focused on all areas of Irving. We listen to what are our prospects seeking, what areas do they want to reside, what is important to them, and then our team responds to their questions with access to information. And ultimately, we're wanting to be in the top 5, and once we know we've made it to the top 5, we ultimately want to turn that prospect into a project and that project into a win. And that's really the competitive side of our team day in and day out. But we know while we're going through the process, so are many other communities that we compete against that are ultimately shopping for those investments and jobs. And it's not easy. First and foremost, we have to establish trust. Each of you play a role in that. Our prospects are watching your Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. They're watching our mayor and council. They come in with a list of questions and ask us what our thoughts are, and we share, we believe we can work with anyone and everyone. That's what makes Irving so beautiful. But we don't shy away from the tough questions. We're very transparent in who has real estate here in Irving, who owns our buildings, who has opportunities. We directly connect our prospects with companies that are looking to come home to Irving, so they're hearing directly from the customers. I've had the privilege to work in this community for 22 years, and I'm still learning. We have over 10,000 businesses that call Irving home, and we're still learning who they are. That's what's so unique about this community.
We've talked a lot tonight about Las Colinas and a lot of the development up there and what we're doing. Can you tell us what kind of interest you've had in what type of businesses? Necessarily, you don't got to go into detail, but what type of businesses have expressed interest in our South Irving corridor?
In the South Irving corridor, you've got a lot of entrepreneurs. Again, I spoke earlier about manufacturing. I know there's a lot of public opinion around data centers, but just as important as Irving's location is from a geographic perspective, 114 is really the fiber corridor for North Texas, and data centers play a really critical role. I think you as Planning and Zoning Commission, ultimately our mayor and council are making sure that data centers are integrated into key areas of our community, but not overshadowing or overtaking. We've got restaurateurs, really all companies are considering all of Irving, sir. But there is a certain demand for amenities around restaurant or placemaking from an entertainment perspective that needs to be walkable for ultimately certain companies to say this is where we're going to be located.
And are you sharing that input back with staff and council and stuff that you're seeing, that what amenities need to be here in order to attract bigger corporation businesses in our South Irving corridor? And the follow-up to that is that you made a comment, it's more smaller businesses. So what is the chamber also doing to help the smaller companies in the South Irving corridor?
So again, I point to our Small Biz Blitz, which is really an opportunity to say thank you to our small businesses for being here, but it provides that warm introduction to work with the business owners in their environment. Many of our small businesses can't leave their restaurant or their office because, They might be one of 5 employees or the only employee working that day. So we try to make sure to just establish a relationship. From establishing that relationship, we then want to plug them in, right? I mean, we're not here to ultimately generate their book of business, but we are here to provide them with factual information and access to resources, social media platforms to be a part of, community engagement opportunities to amplify their business establishment, to ultimately generate customers throughout the Irving community. And Jocelyn, that noise doesn't bother us. That's a job. We view that as economic development at its best.
They're actually tearing up the structure of the parking garage. Yeah, you gotta love it.
Thank you for hiring those individuals to work.
But what I meant by that is the same motivation you give and the same enthusiasm you give towards DAR or the other bigger corporations. Are we doing the same for people, the smaller businesses that are wanting to come into Irving? Are we helping them find the necessary resources, the land, the best fit for them, where they can open? And as we bring in big corporations into South Irving, we will be bringing them additional customers, we'll be bringing them additional revenue, so they don't have to be 1 employee or 5 employees, they can be 10 or 15. And so where's y'all's role in that, as far as what we've been trying to accomplish down south?
So we treat every project as it's the most important project. You know, whether it's 10 jobs and 5,000 square feet or 5,000 jobs and, you know, a million square feet. Each project in Irving is important to the ecosystem of Irving's business community. We also want to make sure when we recruit those large projects in, sir, that we introduce them to the small and middle market businesses that are at home in Irving, because they often want to shop locally. And make sure that those small businesses are aware of how to sign up to be a vendor, be approved a vendor. They don't have the requirements, how can they get them? So we often serve as the conduit to that information as well. Women's Business Council Southwest has their operation and headquarters here at home in Irving, so we view them as a partner and helping to serve our small businesses, ultimately getting access to middle market and enterprise contracts. And when I say enterprise, I'm talking about our larger businesses, right? We're known as the headquarters of headquarters for a reason. I think Governor Abbott liked that tagline that the state's using, that they're the headquarters of headquarters within the U.S., so we take that as a compliment. But we're going to continue to make sure we fully understand mayor and council's policy direction. I obviously report to a separate board, as I shared earlier, 56 members. They weigh in on the strategic plan, help guide, poke holes at it, but they often are huge champions of opening the door. Many of our prospects are generated right here at home by having an authentic relationship with our existing business industry. I also, Madam Chair, as you know, I share with mayor and council often when I'm in front of them, though, we are always one chair or president CEO away from a decision that doesn't include Irving. Just as equally, it could include Irving. So we want to focus on those opportunities that could include Irving. But I just want to underscore, and compliment Mara's presentation earlier, we can't let our foot off the gas of our success. And we have to continue to provide placemaking opportunities that ultimately the commercial sector wants to bring their employees here in Irving, throughout all of Irving, to take advantage of.
I think it's a fair statement to say you get very involved in workforce development,
Yes.
which impacts South Irving. You got very involved in, or you were very involved, I'm assuming, in HEB and the new not Trader Joe's, but Joe V's. Kroger downtown, and while they may not be the strict, pure economic development opportunities that you're talking about today, the city has done a good job in attracting those kinds of things that are part of that placemaking that we've talked about for people who live in Irving.
I think, again, just as much as we listen to our customers on the business side, the city manager and his entire team are listening to those resident surveys. So thank you, Madam Chair, for bringing up, that H-E-B. And it wasn't just, bring an H-E-B grocer to Irving, but how do we build a relationship with this entity that obviously our community wants to see that brand here locally, but are there other brands within your book of business that we can bring in? H-E-B, Central Market, Joe V's, et cetera. If you take away anything from my presentation, just please know it's ultimately about trust. These companies are spending millions to billions of dollars in local communities and hiring staff to ultimately accomplish their business goals. They have choices. We ultimately want their choice to be right here at home in Irving, and y'all play a critical part in that process for projects that require a rezoning consideration or a variance. And we thank you for the thorough review and the work that you do. You have an incredible staff at the city that we have the pleasure to work alongside. They often make us look really good. And we just appreciate the ability to do that day in and day out. Any other questions?
Any plans for the former stadium site?
So the former stadium site, the PUD 6 area, based on the Economic Development Strategic Plan, is a target area for redevelopment. We've been in multiple prospect meetings. We'll continue to take interest, and when there's an opportunity, we'll bring that forward through the economic development process, through City Manager Hillman's office, for mayor and council to weigh in. If it requires any zoning consideration, obviously that will be in front of this body to consider. But there is interest, and we're doing our part, often in a confidential manner for the NDAs that we're under, to tell our story and amplify the advantages of having an Irving, Texas address.
How important is DART on this business development?
So all forms of transportation are important. When companies are looking to relocate to an area, or companies are here today and they're working to serve mobility needs of their workforce, all forms of transportation matter. Those individuals that, get from home to office via car, they want to make sure they have sound roads to travel on. So that, Road to the Future program that Irving's been running, that's critical for the employees that use bus or rail. They want to make sure that their workforce has a quality experience in that space. And for the vendors and suppliers, or the workforce that are using the air transportation to get to and from the business that the office is producing during a time frame, they want to make sure that that experience is fluid.
So would you say it's equally important as it was 20 years ago as it is now?
What's important is that Irving is able to offer a variety of transportation options for workforce to get to and from their place of work.
Any update you can provide us in terms of businesses that may be coming to Irving? Besides HEV, I know HEV, but something else that I don't know that we may not know about?
Well, have you had the pleasure to shop at Joe V's yet?
My wife did. I haven't yet.
Oh,
but,
it's
but yes,
great.
my wife
Okay.
already went.
Well,
yes.
if you have
It
a
was
chance
packed.
to fit it into your day,
I know, it was
it's quite
packed.
an awesome experience. So yes, we can confirm, because HEB shared, that they are looking to bring that grocer home to Irving. And I think I mentioned earlier, we've got over 150 projects in the pipeline that our team's working on. But respecting the NDAs and our competitive advantage, not really able to share any more at this time, but I will continue to make sure to keep mayor and council updated through our mid-year and end-of-year report. And we're going to continue to make sure to amplify and tell the Irving Las Colinas story day in and day out. I will share, we are having greater interest from companies that are based globally outside of the U.S. looking to set up operations within the U.S. and central time zones. So we have seen an uptick in that space. We're keeping Joe Chapa quite busy.
Beth, one question that came up about the Irving Mall, and I know we're not the only city that's struggling with our malls at this point. I think all of the cities are. Is there any thought process going on about what do we do with the old mall structures because people just aren't shopping in malls anymore?
So that's a great question. If the city's interested in purchasing it, we could probably have more influence over it. But today, for the owners of that establishment, I think they would share it's performing within their book of business. So as much as, we have to balance the community's feedback on certain projects versus the reality of is it publicly or privately owned? And if it's privately owned, how can we work with the ownership to make sure the aesthetics or the concepts offered are in alignment with the community desires. But I'll share, I've had the pleasure to sit down with, the various owners and, that location and the businesses within that location, are producing and sometimes exceeding expectation. But I hear you, and I understand that everybody's got a different shopping experience in which they desire or facade appeal in which they'd like to see in such a key quarter like that.
Thank you, Beth. We really
pleasure.
appreciate your time tonight.
Thank y'all for serving the community in this capacity, and thank you for the invitation.
It's kind of a bit of a segue to our last topic tonight, which is the North Nursery Corridor Neighborhood Plan, because there is a component where we're looking at how P&Z's role can benefit that corridor. So Jocelyn, are you presenting that?
Well, do you want to do it tonight, or, we've been 2 hours.
Yeah.
Abraham would normally do this presentation. He went home sick today, and we have a really light meeting next time. So we thought we would do this in March, if y'all would like.
Perfect, we'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you. I hope Abraham recovers quickly. All right, with that in mind, unless there's any other questions, was this helpful? Did you enjoy it? Okay, great. You're the one good. So, a meeting adjourned, 7:57 PM. Thank you all very much.